I think it's time to talk about the Vaush. I've been trying to get Vaush on my hippy dippy show, okay? I've been trying, and I keep getting messages from people like, Dylan, why is Vaush not on the show? You just had Destiny on. Why is Vaush not on? And I just want to be upfront that it's not that I've boxed him out or anything. I want my show to be open to a bunch of diverse perspectives, and Vaush has been on the show before. He was on a lot of the shows, but Vaush declined, and I heard he wasn't doing these types of debates, and then I was a little skeptical because I looked at breaking points and I was like, that's strange. He seems to be debating people on breaking points, so it's not that Vaush has a problem with debates. Was it a problem with my show? Was it a problem with debating right-wingers? Was it a problem with what? And so it seems that he's come forward and made a video explaining it, so now I have a better understanding, a better idea, and he has a problem debating right-wingers, where when he was on Breaking Points, Sagar wasn't on there. It was Crystal, it was Ryan, I believe Ryan was there. Anyway, point was, it wasn't right-wingers. And so Vaush has apparently tapped out, quit debating right-wingers. Now, when you consider the fact that Vaush got a lot of his following through debate, by having debates, many times provocative debates online with right-wingers, going into their environments and debating them and getting a following by doing that boldly, I don't know, like I said that like he was on the trenches or something, but you know, the idea was he was bold about it, and that's what attracted people. Like, he would go into the right-wing circles, he'd have 3, 4, 5 right-wingers, and he'd try to just go all balls to the walls, throwing hands, throwing right, lefts, and he was pretty good rhetorically. He was very good at his job rhetorically. And so he was able to get a decent following from that. So hearing that he wants to stop it, I've heard from him before that he doesn't think that there's much in it for him, but I think that I might disagree. And I think that there's still much value to be had in debating the right. So him saying that it's become useless, I think I disagree with. So I wanted to check out this video and figure out why Vaush is leaving me hanging. I said he'll host one, but you know, we want guests. I'm the host. We already got a host. Who knows though?
I mean, my main issue with talking rhetoric is that I don't think most Republicans can be moved over at this point. I was more hopeful about that back in 2019, but genuinely at this point, in order to be enough of a Republican that you'll stand to defend your positions, you have to be really in the cult mindset. It doesn't make it impossible, and rhetoric is still important in life in general. You know, it's a broadly useful skill, but the framework for teaching rhetoric, like, is usually been, how do I convince someone that I'm arguing with, or how do I like defend this position or whatever. But it's like, dude, I don't think I've seen a productive conversation with a Republican in any context between anyone and anyone else in years. When was
Really? I mean, I don't know. I think I've had productive conversations with people who are registered Republicans, both in real life and on the internet. Maybe, I mean, when it comes to like performative online conversations, it's harder, and it also depends on what you define. It depends on how you define productive. Because if you define productive as we both sit down calmly and rationally list out our positions and in 100% good faith, and with no coyness, we engage in a back and forth, you know, MLA formatted conversation. Nah, that doesn't happen a lot online. No, I don't think so. But that doesn't mean that people watching that conversation, you could still not convince them, either because they're either Republicans or even just registered Republicans or thinking of becoming registered Republicans or moderates that are thinking of voting with the right this year. There's a lot of people. You'll be so surprised.
Immoral.
For the people who are super online, let me tell you something. Most people in this country do not follow news and politics like you do. If you're watching this right now, most people probably do not follow news and politics like you do if you're following it consistently. A lot of people are only going to start following it after Labor Day. And so in my mind, tapping out of debating right-wingers before many Americans even made up their mind about the election, before Labor Day, when you could still convince these people who either moderates, people who consider themselves independents, or even certain Republicans who have flipped over. We saw that little Nikki Haley insurgency within the Republican primary. And while I think it might be more difficult to win them over to a Kamala Harris campaign, which might be one of the few demographics we might have lost a tiny bit with the Kamala Harris switchover, which I think was the correct decision, definitely looking back, I still think that there is a value in trying to appeal to those people with less than 80 days into the election.
The last time you guys saw that?
And I mean, look at Piers Morgan's show. People tune in to watch these things. I think it depends how you use the moment. It depends what topics you focus on when talking to the audience. It depends on the format. It depends on a whole bunch of things. You shouldn't need to engage in every single debate, and not every single debate will be useful in even convincing people. But the idea of swearing off the tactic with right-wingers in its entirety,
Remember back in 2017, 2018, 2019,
totally gay. Thank you for the primer.
Even 2020, pretty often you would see what looked like good faith Republicans sitting down and going, okay, well, I do have some concerns about the border, and I do think we should bring jobs back to America. And they would like have an argument. It's like, okay, they're wrong and they've been fed bad info, but they're not crazy. They just have bad info. I haven't seen anything like that in years. And that's not an exaggeration. I genuinely can't remember the last time I saw that. I know it happens. I know it's not literally impossible, but man, things have changed like badly. Maybe godforsaken, but I mean, rhetoric.
One second, I just saw something in chat from Evil City. There's no debate to be had with American conservatives in 2024 that is not about pure bad faith. Not one. Name an example. You cannot. Well, I mean, like, do you think I can't find any example on the internet of a good faith conversation between people who disagree? Well, I can. I mean, I've had them within the last 4 years. Find me one. You can look through on my YouTube channel. I've had them before.
Morally corrupt.
Other people have had them before. If you don't think these conversations exist, it's because you choose not to see them or not seek them out, or because they're not popular and they don't drag out attention. Let me ask you, what of my videos do people know of? Do they know the one where Destiny and Actual Jake had a cage match debate thing and it was very confrontational? Or do they know the ones where I sit down and have like a rational conversation with Larry Sharp or somebody about like economic policy or something? No. They're going to watch the latter one. I mean, the former. They're going to watch the former. They want to watch the fiery, divisive stuff. That gets algorithmically rewarded. But whether or not you can have an individual, like, good faith conversation is not even what's important to what we're discussing. We're discussing, like, debate, like internet debates. That's what we're discussing. We're discussing debate for an audience. You don't need to have a good faith debate opponent to still have a purpose in debating them. You can still employ people with the skills necessary to have these conversations in their everyday life when talking to friends and family. You can still knock down these talking points to an audience who may have been susceptible to them or were already susceptible and convinced by them, and maybe you don't convince them, but you begin to sow doubt. You could make people who might have been leaning one way, maybe they don't lean your way, but maybe they decide instead of voting for Trump, they're just going to stay home. I know conservatives, I know Republicans who can't stomach voting for Kamala, but they would have voted for Trump, but instead they're going to stay home due to certain behavior that Trump is engaged with and how they were convinced about Trump, for example, calling for the suspension of the U.S. Constitution. It pushed them off. Is it the majority of Republicans? No, but it is a section. And let me tell you something, when you're dealing with margins where 0.5%, 0.3%, 0.7%, 20 to 30,000 votes in states where millions and millions of people can have a real impact, where Trump was calling the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, to overturn 11,000 votes to change the results of the election. That, when you're dealing with margins that close, I don't feel like putting a potential tool down to convince people. I don't feel like this is an environment where we bunker strategy on rhetoric.
Rhetoric is very, very important. Very, very important. Being able to argue well, it's not just something that you do in political debates. It helps you in interpersonal arguments, not because you're trying to epically own the opponent, but because understanding what everyone's saying and how to engage with it is just generally useful. Like, that's not like, it doesn't even need to be an antagonistic skill. It's just a communication skill. It has applications all across the spectrum of human communication. So it's still important. It's just difficult. Unironically, make more videos about rhetoric though. Okay, to be clear, all of my videos are about rhetoric to the extent that they all contain rhetoric, right?
Deep.
Like when I make an argument, I don't need to say, this is how you make the argument. If I'm making the argument, that's an example of the argument that one might point to, or at least that I would point to as an example of what I think good rhetoric is, you know. If only debate wasn't dead. I haven't gone over it yet because it's meant to be one of the things that I go over that I keep not going over because
saying it after the hippy dippy relaunch, we did 1.5 hour debate with Destiny, AJW, and the rest of them. It led to like 2 weeks of content for all of the people involved, even if it wasn't on purpose. Look, you can see a chat right now. I just noticed. Mr. Unfamiliar, did you see the new hippy dippy? Our fans are everywhere. We lurk in the shadows. When people say Twitch poll is dead, they say, no, I still see it twitching. What's that twitch? It's hippy dippy, okay? It's hippy dippy. Even if it's like a refugee Twitch poll and half of you guys are on YouTube now.
Yesterday I was pooped because I had just gotten back from the hike in Mount Rainier, and today I'm exhausted because I have a headache and so on and so forth. Let me show you why I just don't care about debating and frankly just don't have any interest in doing it. Okay, look at this. This is one of the things I'll do a segment on when I finally get around to it. Okay.
Republican governor and Republican secretary of state in the state of Georgia.
What's your name? You said Parker?
My name's Parker. We have a Republican governor and Republican secretary of state in Georgia that approved our elections, and Donald Trump said that wasn't constitutional.
All right, relax.
Donald Trump tried to undermine our Constitution.
You're at 10. I just walked in. I'm here to just learn.
Hey, you're an anti-patriotic, anti-constitutional person crashing our party because you tried to stop our democracy.
I got one question.
Donald Trump called the secretary of state of Georgia and told him to find him some votes.
What is a woman?
Oh my God. That is so weird, y'all. Maybe you should meet one.
I'm married to a woman.
Same.
And that's why I just don't care anymore. Charlie Kirk is one of the faces of
I don't understand
the Republican movement.
Is the idea like, hey, Charlie, he's a popular conservative. Look how bad faith that was. He just pivoted. He didn't talk about it. Like, he didn't engage in like a good faith debate in this like almost like he didn't get ambushed. He knew what he was doing going there. But in this surprise debate, you can call it quick debate, whatever. I mean, nobody really ever thought Charlie Kirk was particularly, I don't know, good faith. But that doesn't mean that debating Charlie Kirk cannot have a purpose to it, cannot have an effect that could be positive. I mean, I think, you know, I mean, I could have sworn that didn't Vaush debate Charlie at one point? And from that debate, I mean, I saw Charlie say some strange things about Martin Luther King. I remember seeing some crazy memes and crazy clips going around. I think it wouldn't be surprising to me whatsoever if people were legitimately convinced or at least pushed away from Charlie from that conversation to some degree. I also don't see how it couldn't be useful to, if you can do well, and as long as you know what you're doing, if you were to go back and forth with Charlie and embarrass him. I mean, look, in the United States right now, in this race, the Democrats are making one big narrative push that I think is smart, and that is the reconstitution of patriotism. You saw those USA chants at the DNC. You saw them waving the USA signs, and they were all leaning into how much they love the Constitution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're picking up what they think is ground that Republicans gave up by having Donald Trump call for the suspension of the U.S. Constitution, of having him be somebody who tried to overthrow the institutions that, you know, function to transfer power from one presidency to the next. And so they're picking up that banner of like democracy, freedom, etc. That kid in that young guy, we're about the same age, I would imagine, actually. That young guy, in his pitch, he was talking about Trump going after our democratic institutions. If you are going to lean into this to try to pick up votes that Trump is losing either with independents or people on the center right, quote unquote. The only way you can do that and let people know about this messaging change is by taking that message to the people. And that's also going to include engaging with the people who you are going to be going after as doing things that are anti-freedom or even anti-American, such as, for example, calling for Myanmar-style military coups, which Michael Flynn did call for, and Trump said he might bring him back into a new administration. Actually, he said he would. I'm just saying he might because I'm trying to be slightly hopeful.
I debated him for 2 hours and I won. I dog walked him. He spent 20 minutes being aggro, and when he realized it wouldn't work, the rest of it was me giving like an educational lesson to him and Tim Pool's audience. Now he hears 30.
Was that not useful? I thought that would have been useful. I thought that would have been good for Vaush. You would think if he did performed well, it would have been good for people watching. Maybe it doesn't like change anyone's mind, but it makes people at least be more hesitant to say things ignorantly and boldly about, you know, for example, Martin Luther King or any of the other things that came up in that conversation than they would have before. Who knows?
30 seconds of completely correct talking points, and then he blusters back to a thought-terminating cliche that he has no interest in engaging with or answering. If I debated Charlie Kirk now, rather than 2 hours of me dog walking him, it would be 5 minutes of whatever the subject was meant to be, and then he would say, "Oh well, what am I? Oh yeah, well how about this? What's a woman?" And then I would have to go, "Do you actually want to get into that, or was that just your attempt at escaping the topic?" And then he'd say like, "Oh well, what is a woman?" And then that would be the rest of it. There would be there is no discussion anymore.
Well, I mean, it would just depend on how. I mean, I don't know. I feel like you could deal with that rhetorically. Like, I don't want to talk about what a woman is. We're talking about child tax credits today. What's a child tax credit, Charlie? And then you try to keep it on point. And if he's dodging, then okay, then his audience gets to watch him dodge. Other people get to watch him dodge. And the worst result of something like that could be, if you perform well, is that his audience copes about it. Not that he picks up anybody. There's a good chance you'll pick up people. I've had conversations like this before, not with Charlie Kirk, and I have seen myself pick up people. I saw other people pick up people. I've gotten emails. I know that type of stuff happens. So I can see how what he's talking about is frustrating. And the lack of good faith means it's not good for the person you're talking to, right? So it might be useless in trying to convince people like Charlie Kirk to change his mind, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily useless as a tool to try to convince other people.
Nothing exists, nothing matters. What is a chair? Can you imagine debating someone and then you ask them any question, they're like, what is a chair? What is a chair? Go ask Socrates, dipshit. Like, there's no point that no one wants to have a conversation. If Tim invited you back, would you go at this point? No. I've turned down plenty of debate. No.
And like, I'm not saying that everything is great for debate here or there. Like, there are certain audiences where it might make sense for you not to engage debate. You don't really think there's much going to be picked up. The topic doesn't make much sense. The moderator's not going to do a good job. Like, it's all about like time and place, right? For like choosing, if strategically, time and place. If you're talking about good faith, I'll talk to anyone, anywhere, of course. And plus, I do kind of enjoy having conversations. But when you talk about strategically, and just like as a tool, which I assume is how we're describing, like as a political tool, like, yeah, there could be times and places where it is very strategic. Like, I do not see how the Majority Report did not pick up a massive W when they ambushed Steven Crowder in that debate space and he ran away. I mean, I thought that, and even if they did go through and actually have a debate, maybe it would have just been even bigger. And instead of Steven Crowder looking dodgy, he just would have looked like he was uninformed because he prepared to talk to a YouTuber who knows relatively very little about the political topics they were going to discuss talking with Sam Cedar.
No, I'm genuinely, my interest in, I don't want to do things I'm not interested in. If the sauce isn't there, what would it be? There's no longer an interest. No matter how good you are at debate, you always need both sides to be invested in doing it. Like if I showed up for a debate and they just made like farting noises with their mouth, I can't make a good point in that environment. It requires two.
It requires moderation if something like that is happening, for example, the muting of mics and stuff like that, and you can get those standards set. It requires you to be able to like verbally stand up for yourself, and I don't think Vaush can't do that. I'm just saying like it requires this as a tool, generally speaking, because I know there's people listening outside of Vaush. I don't even know if Vaush is listening, probably not.
people engaging with some standard of mutual competency. It's just unfun. Like it's not even a matter of performing well. It's just unfun.
Oh, he doesn't enjoy. Well, if his point is just I don't enjoy this anymore because the people I'm talking to are not good faith, and I feel bad because I want to have good faith conversations with real people. Well, then, same buddy, that's disheartening too. But that's not a strategic argument. This is exhausting argument.
All of,
but also it changes it. I mean, it could be both too.
The rhetorical skills that I'm interested in meaningless. You just scream your sound bites. That's it. Remember the debate between Moist Critical and Sneeko, where they like Moist Critical was objectively correct and reasonable the entire time, and Sneeko was like interspersing bad arguments with being pro pedophilia. And after that, every right-wing account on Twitter was like, yo, Sneeko just owned Moist Critical on trans kids or whatever. No one cares. Nothing matters. This is what I mean.
I don't see the problem here isn't the debate. The problem here is what people saw of the debate after the fact and how the algorithm interacted with the debate. So the problem here would be, how do you package it afterwards, right? Like, because I could equally argue, like, okay, here's a good debate where, and we could pull any number of them up, any instance of like somebody dunking on somebody else for a good reason and then that clip going viral. And I could point to that and say, see, as long as you market it well and you deliver it to your audience, these can be convincing. But that would be an argument about the algorithm. That would be an argument about, you know, what was and what wasn't shown and the deceptiveness of that. But I mean, that's true about even like your normal stream Vaush. Like, let's say Vaush just streams regularly and then somebody clips something deceptively and posts it online, and then everybody says, oh my God, look, Vaush is so stupid. But okay, well then what was what's the purpose of the stream? Did you convince anyone? Well, the problem there isn't that the stream isn't convincing. The problem is the deception, and you deal with the deception. But that could be a problem not only for debate, that could be a problem with the normal stream, that could be a problem with a book, that could be a problem with any type of form of media. So what he's talking about here is a frustrating issue, and I sympathize with him deeply because he's not the only person who has seen this issue, but it's not something that is singular for debates. It's for everything.
About no unity. How do you form unity with that? It's only power. They don't care about anything else. They'll do or say anything. They don't believe in anything. Anti-empiricism is a core tenet of fascism. Once you free yourself from the burden of having to actually believe in something and hold to that position, you can do or say anything. And I just have no interest in engaging with it.
I don't know, man. I feel like Sneeko engaging in debates where he like says disgusting stuff and makes himself look like a kitty diddler does actually hurt his reputation and make it more difficult for him if he wanted to continue to climb up the ladder as a content creator. I do think, now these aren't irreversible hurdles. Bad people who continue to show that they're bad can still succeed depending on a whole set of factors, but it can certainly be a pretty big speed bump for them. I can't say that, like, if somebody loses a debate, that necessarily a ton of people are going to get convinced or the career is going to end. But what I can say, if somebody makes a fool of themselves in the debate, it can be particularly damaging. I mean, remember what happened to JonTron? My God.
The hippy dippy revival was such a great example of why debate is stupid. Actual Justice Warrior was just straight up engaging in pedantic trolling with a stupid grin on his face the entire time, to the point where even Destiny was about to leave a few times. The right doesn't believe in truth anymore. There's no point. None of them. There is not a single right-leaning figure out there who would engage in a debate and be embarrassed if they performed poorly.
Okay, so I'll respond to this specifically, and I'm going to respond to this from my position, my genuine like political position, and not as a debate host, right? This is just like, I don't know. I feel like I have to separate this in some manner. For me, as a consumer of a debate and not as the producer of a debate, when I watch what happened during that back and forth with AJW and everybody, to some extent, the behavior is an answer to questions that I have and can impact my answer. For example, when the conversation is shifting over to like, hey, like if the conversation is these people are a threat to democracy and this is the point that one side is making, but the other side is like, can you prove 100% that if he gets elected, that will be the end of democracy and not just a 90%, 80 to 70% chance? If the debate has been like, yeah, Trump is a threat to democracy, but he's not 100% going to kill democracy, if that is how the debate formed, and you're just like tiptoeing around that the whole time, I think that has a purpose in and of itself. To be like, oh, so it seems like the conversation isn't if Trump is a threat to democracy. If nobody can defend that Trump isn't a threat to democracy, it's that, is Trump an existential threat to democracy that once he gets elected, the guardrails will for sure fail? And so for me, that's enough to discourage me from voting to Trump. If I think that Trump is 20% or 10% or 30% a threat to end democracy, not like most likely he won't because of the guardrails or incompetence or any number of factors, but there's a 30% chance he will, I want the continuation of the state. I want the government to be able to perform its functions. I want to make sure that grandma keeps getting her Social Security checks and that, you know, that rioting doesn't take over everything and that crime spikes through the roof. I want this. I want a democratic state. I want to conserve our liberties. And so I'm going to vote against Trump. And from that perspective of consumer, that debate, even if the people having the conversations didn't necessarily even agree on the prompt, I still think that there's a value that can be taken from that. Maybe it's because I am more of an optimist. Maybe it's because it's my product and everybody likes to smell their own farts, but I could still see a value in it. And not to mention that 1.5 hour conversation produced 2 weeks of conversations about that same topic, where the majority of Destiny's time talking about it has been talking about either, you know, Trump's direct attacks on democratic institutions, the overturning of the vote, or has been talking about, well, what was the actual prompt? And at the end of the day, the prompt question, like, while that matters for like managing debates and stuff like that, that first question is what matters when it comes to the election. That first question is what matters when it comes to our democracy. And so for it to be getting 2 weeks of attention from that 1.5 hour conversation, I would say that there was a value added. How do you measure that value? I don't know. 7. I don't know. I can't put a number on it. But I do think that there can be value taken from that if somebody views that debate and reflects on why the debate is happening the way it is, what the people talked about around the direct attacks on institutions or the anti-democratic tendencies of Donald Trump, and where the debate shifted from, is democracy on the ballot, to, well, Trump's a threat to democracy, but we don't know for sure he's going to end democracy. Like, if you're somebody who cares about democracy, that sentence in and of itself should be of a concern to you if you buy that argument. But that is where the debate ended up, really went towards the end of it. So I still see there as a value to that conversation. Not to mention 2 weeks of content.
In order for a person to be embarrassed that they perform poorly, there had to be any expectation whatsoever that they were going to participate in a meaningful way. That means not only are the participants
attention from whom and what value? And then Evil City decided that his caps lock broke and wrote, not a single Trumper was convinced. He's very frustrated with me. I can feel it through the keyboard right now. I can feel it through the keyboard through some people. Okay, let's say that no Trumper was convinced. Let me just grant that. I wouldn't necessarily grant that, but let's say I grant that. You don't need to necessarily convince the people in the other people's camp. If you stop people from going into their camp, or convince other people that weren't in a camp before to go into your camp, then that can still be considered a victory. Again, most Americans don't like Joe Biden. Most Americans don't like Donald Trump. That would lead me to believe that there's also a substantial amount of Americans that could probably be moved one way or the other, depending on information that they take in. Now, that last part's important, though, because you still need to get the information to the person. It's not enough that Donald Trump's a convicted felon.
5D2D Derek has donated.
You need to explain why that matters.
The other thing is, even if you don't convince anyone, you still show your viewers how to argue the point.
Give it $5, and that is true.
the pundits themselves disinterested, their audiences are too. Nobody cares. It's all trolling at every level. I mean, When I went on Hippy Dippy, like, I don't know, 8 months ago or whatever, the only time the conversation boomed was when Alex Stein came over to sexually harass people in the call, and then people said he was awful, and then he just smiled and nothing mattered. Nothing matters. None of it matters. Nothing matters.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like if Alex Stein was on a few times, he has a terrible reputation online. Generally speaking, outside of the people who are diehard conservatives, most people don't really like Alex Stein or his comedy particularly well outside of his political sect. But the comedy's made for his political sect, so that's not particularly surprising. But people didn't like what he said to AOC. People don't like those comments. And I do think that even if you find something distasteful, that doesn't mean that there can't, like, him going and making arguments that get knocked down, there could still be value taken from that. Him going and acting in a way that makes himself look bad can actually bring down his movement or bring down his cause. I've seen many times where people get paired on the conservative and left-wing side with people who are not particularly the best, or they end up saying points that are really bad, and you can see their side wince because they don't like being dragged down. Dead weight, so to speak. I'm not saying that Alex Stein is dead weight, necessarily. What I am saying, though, is that there can still be like a value from this when it comes to convincing people, even if it seems messy and there's a lot of yelling. Like, it's one thing to say this is frustrating. It's another thing to say that it's not even it doesn't center information, and it's not 100% informative. You do learn, you just don't learn maybe as fast as if it was a traditional classroom. It's another thing to say it's not enjoyable. For a lot of people, it isn't enjoyable. But it's another thing to say that it can't convince anyone or it doesn't convince anyone. That's a totally different thing entirely. If your goal is to convince Alex Stein, then yeah, that's not going to work. But maybe don't aim for Alex Stein. Aim for the person who you're going to be like, you see that Alex Stein fella? Right? We're not like that. That would be the goal if you were the debater, so to speak.
Argument for or against. There's no point. You could deliver the best possible point. What, your audience agrees with you? Their audience doesn't. There's no way of moving over anyone because they don't come to that thinking. It's not like the old Sargon days where there are fans of Sargon of Akkad who think that he like has a correct point that other people aren't willing to. That's not. It's a different era. I think, I talk conservatives down quite a bit here. I think, if anything, I don't talk them down enough. I think that people in my community and broadly still overestimate how...
My Bridges episode is premiering later tonight, is it? Oh, it is. 9:30. Well, I'll probably wrap this up in the next 10 minutes anyway. You guys can go all watch it. And so you have more content going into the night.
How much they believe in truth. I think debates against less mainstream figures are pointless, but don't you think more mainstream people with a broad appeal to non-voters have more of a point? I don't know. I don't know what that sentence means. Destiny straight up said when reviewing the conversation I lost by even engaging, hasn't that been like half the debates Destiny has done? Pardon, I'm sure he does a lot of debates and I don't catch them, but I remember he said the same thing after debating Nick Fuentes on Fresh and Fit, where like, as it turns out, you can't actually have a debate when the opposition is just saying shit about Jews, and the hosts of the debate are also just saying shit about Jews, and it's
all about the environment. This is the thing, is like, well, yes, Fresh and Fit is not what I would call an ideal debate environment for topics as complex as socioeconomics and race issues. Yeah, I'm not going to defend the Fresh and Fit podcast as the arena of modern dialogue and the free market of ideas. That's not what I'm going to do. What I am going to say is that I would understand that it wouldn't be the best place to debate someone like Nick Fuentes because the host isn't going to hold them down to answer questions. Maybe they're not going to quiet down people as much when they'll let people get away with certain things. Like, I can understand that, and it would be more likely that someone like Nick Fuentes would agree to go on a platform like that than one where he might actually be held down, or where the journalist or debate host or whatever the person who is hosting the back and forth might actually ask follow-up questions or cite stuff that, might not align with the message that is trying to be pumped out. But on someone like the Fresh and Fit podcast, absolutely. I think a lot of people get a bad taste in their mouth for debate because of the places they start and see the debates, or the type of guests that come on the debates, or the lack of variety in the debates.
Just sitting there like, and you can say anything.
And so that's like, you know, scares them off of all debates. But there's debates for all sorts of people. I'm such a hippie.
True, false, good, bad, it doesn't matter. There's no relationship between what you say and the quality of your speech and what actually happens as a consequence. It's all just edgy blood sports. It's worse than blood sports, because in the blood sports era of debate, at least during that era, if you got a good zinger, that actually meant something. There was actual winning back in the blood sports days. If you up and you got your ass trashed back in the blood sports days of debate, you could lose reputation for that. Now it doesn't matter. It's all clown shit. There's no me. It's a complete nihilism. It might as well be like solipsistic. You scream into the void. Why would I participate in this? It's degrading to the human spirit. I mean, debates are good entertainment. Yeah, and people like Aiden Ross are especially entertaining to certain demographics of individuals. I will be entertaining doing things I enjoy doing. That's it. If you think I'm only entertaining when I'm doing a debate, why are you still watching? Right, you've been in a content drought for a while. But also, frankly, I think you have bad taste. I was there for my debates. I know what I'm like. I know what they're like. And I know what I'm like when I'm not debating. I think that I'm pretty entertaining across the board. If you're only there for the debate portion, I agree they were good. But life changes, man.
Okay, if he's just saying, like, I don't want to do this anymore because I don't like it, then there's not like a thing to debate there. It's just like, you know, we only have one life, use it, live in it, you know, trying to find something that gives you fulfillment. I'm not going to argue from that perspective.
You know? Like, that you have to accept that.
But I will say that you lose on a potential audience, you lose on potential collaboration opportunities and to get your voice on bigger platform. And I don't think it's necessarily like a swearing off debate with right-wingers is not necessarily the best business decision or I think a good strategic decision. But if it's just for his personal life, I will say if there's one thing that dropping debate is good for, it's your personal mental health and well-being.
I thought they were good. Yeah, man, I thought it was great back before I had a lower back injury. That was great. That was a great time.
Dylan be hearing one thing and then be repeating a totally different thing? Okay, then just tell me what I'm missing, Evil City. Evil City is the knight in chat, pushing back, defending me, the debate monger, a pimp of debate, from the Honorable Vaush.
Of my life, but it's been a long time. I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying watching debates. At the end of the day, I can only really get invested in stuff that I enjoy doing, and the debate space right now is nihilistic to a point that the thought of engaging with it is genuinely depressing. You know,
the only way you improve it is by trying to. The only way you improve it and get the guests that'll make people want to tune in. And the only way to improve the quality of it is also by engaging it, putting your name out there as being willing to do it, looking through it. Like, it's not like something that's just going to passively just like improve or not improve. Like, it, you know, it takes time to like build up contact lists for these channels. And it takes time to like convince people to get on. And it takes good other guests to convince people to come on. You need to have headliners. If you want to convince somebody like Shapiro to come on, you have to have another headliner for them to go to head-to-head with, even though Shapiro wouldn't agree. Point is, like, the space doesn't just... It isn't passive. You have to interact with it to make it better.
I hope you all understand where I've never been humbled in a debate. Certainly I've had ones where my opponent had a good point or was a proficient.
Dylan, the entire vid he's been saying that debating right-wingers is pointless because there's no longer anything to be gained and it rots your brain. Yes, I know that's what he's been saying. That's what I've been responding to the entire whatever.
Speak or anything. I've never had a moment where like afterwards I was like, I'm afraid of debating or anything. It's just look at the last like 8 or 9 attempts at a debate. It's just miserable. I don't enjoy it. I don't think you guys enjoy it. I think you just have strong memories of like some key moments in the channel. But we make new key moments every day. I don't want to turn into one of those sad sacks.
I think if he doesn't want to do it, that's one thing. But he shouldn't pretend that it wasn't good content. There was great content in there. There was banger content in there. There's stuff I'll go back and I'll still rewatch. My goodness. But if that's one thing. If he just wants to say like I don't want to do this anymore, that's fine. But let's not pretend there wasn't any banger content in there. That's not degrade the content of old.
Where all you do is reminisce about the good old days, you know, the memories of good. I'm still alive. The channel's actually booming right now, like more than it ever has.
How do you guys remember the Mike from PA debate? Yes. Yes. Someone tells me the Mike from PA debate wasn't content, and I disagree.
I think it would be misguided of me to think of like, oh man, 3 years ago I had a big debate with, you know, such and such. Like, okay, yeah, that was good.
The banger to trash ratio went from decent to abysmal, let's be real. Yeah, but that doesn't mean, like, the reason I shut down Hippy Dippy is because I thought the market was bad, and I thought the rate of abysmal was going up, so I dropped out, and I re-entered when I thought the market, you know, was good enough to re-enter, and when I felt like I had my feet on the ground in Ukraine, enough so that I could manage both at the same time, which is not an easy task, let me tell you. But, I mean, that doesn't mean you completely, just because there's a lot of abysmal debates, that doesn't mean you don't take a diamond when you see one.
Good. I'm good now.
Just cut shutting. Like, I don't know if Vaush was told tomorrow that he could have a 3-hour debate with Donald Trump, or he could have a 2-hour debate with JD Vance or Ted Cruz or I don't know, Bill O'Reilly or anything, I don't know if he would say no. I think there's something in his soul that would tell him that the opportunity is too good to miss. And I think that, you know, he still got the dog in him. Wait, no, sorry, horse. But you get the idea.
I also think that I'm pretty good at news coverage too. You know, I think that I've fallen into a good rhythm with it. I like it. I didn't used to like covering news. I felt like I was just doing the job of an MSNBC host. Now I feel like I do a good job tying it in. So I think, you know, yeah, I think I've gotten better at it. I like it. It's a skill that I value. I want to get better at it. Would it ever be possible for someone like James from Modern Day Debate to present you a debate you'd be interested in? No, my disinterest in a debate is unconditional at this point. And trust me, I've turned down debates that you guys might have thought that you'd be interested in seeing, but I know what the debate space is like. You know, go take a look at Charlie versus Moist Critical. Go take a look at any of the debates that Destiny has done recently. I haven't seen them, but the debate space is the same for him as it is for me. It's the same space. Go look at him. Destiny's got problems, but he do be yapping. He knows how to talk. What are his conversations like? Do they look like they're full of mutual engagement? Do you come away from those conversations thinking, wow, that was a good use of his intelligence, his time? My guess is no. Maybe in some of them, but my guess is probably not.
I mean, it depends on the conversation. Depends on the debate. Not. There are debates where
Have you been invited on Piers Morgan debates? Yeah, like 4 times. Have you seen a Piers Morgan debate? Everyone shouting over each other for like 30 seconds of uninterrupted speaking. Then Piers Morgan like rolls a dice on what position he's going to hold that day to maximize the views that he gets for that particular.
But that stuff is banging off in the viewership. That's why, look, if Piers Morgan can get that show to do that type of viewership, there should be no reason that a better version couldn't be produced in the area where that type of content has been lurking for years.
Discussion. And if you're like held in poor favor in the dog pile, then like everyone just talks over you. And then Piers Morgan like asks 3 people in a row, like everyone take 1 minute to disagree with the 2 seconds of position expressed by the person. Dude, Vaush, you turn down airtime on live TV. The Piers Morgan, the YouTube site, is that on live TV? I think that's the TV online bit. I know he does stuff on TV, but that's a YouTube show.
I thought it was Talk TV.
But also, yeah, I would turn down time on live TV. What point? You people are incredibly shiftless. When I say I don't want to do debates, why you're like, wow, not even for money? Are you what are you're weak? Did I stutter? It's not even principled. I just don't think it's fun. That's it. Do you not sympathize with that? You all have like myopic ambition brain where you're.
Well, I mean, I sympathize with it because I managed a debate show and I had to manage the debaters, and that was frustrating. Debating can be frustrating too. I never really got too sick of it though. But yeah, I can understand getting tired of it.
To think like, well,
I got tired of hosting it. My God, trying to manage streamers like herding cats.
I would have simply
Heard a lot.
grindsetted it. What do you think I do this for? What do you do, a live TV appearance, not a debate? Well, sure. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get that offer, but sure. If a person wants to come on because they have a disagreement with me, I don't necessarily have an issue with that. In my mind, there's a distinction between a person coming on because they have a disagreement and a debate. A debate carries with it expectations. You are there in a performative sense to disagree, right? But like right wingers never email me saying, hey, I have some disagreements, I want to come on. They say, hey, do you want to come on my show and have a debate? Massive difference between these two in terms of expectations, what's going to happen during it, who's benefiting, who's grifting.
There's a good point. This is why they should have third parties host them.
Blah, 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 blah. If a person has disagreement, I mean, I argue with chat all the time, right? Like if a person has disagreements, I'm totally willing to talk, even if it ends up turning into a debate, because it wasn't, the performative expectation wasn't set from the beginning. The kayfabe wasn't there, right? You enter it just like, okay, we have a disagreement. That's fine. I think there's a meaningful difference there. I would love to have a discussion about AI. No, AI is the devil. See, that was a debate. How famous does someone have to be to discuss something with you/debate? I used to say there's no threshold, but the God's honest truth is that unfortunately, you guys kind of ruined it for yourselves. It's the same reason we don't have call-in streams anymore. Because if you do call-in streams, like as is the case with people who just want to talk, it's trolls or very parasocial people. Like really parasocial people. I remember with the call-in streams, you would have the call.
This is why you need to filter them before you have them come in. You need someone to filter them out.
In debates, especially because people would.
You need like a good crowd of them so you can filter out the best ones and keep the parasocial scragglers away.
Like fake to disagreeing with me because they wanted to talk, and then they'd start giggling, and it just trained me to hear for when people are talking with a smile on their lips, which I got really good at. Because I could tell that they were being like, you know, like they were just, and a lot of them weren't even trolling in the sense that they were trying to waste my time. They were just parasocial dipshits who wanted to talk to me, but knew they couldn't by agreeing with me. So unfortunately, now you have to be some kind of famous to talk to me, because otherwise I'll just assume you're parasocial. I'm sorry, you know, I have a stream to manage here. It's not anything personal.
Well, look, I sympathize with Vaush saying it's not fun. I had to host debates. It was as not fun, if not more not fun, because you have to be the one scheduling it, organizing it for weeks in advance, and deal with every single individual debater. So I would say that I would make the argument. I've done both. Hosting them is less fun than participating in them, especially when you want to say something and not being able to say something when you want to say something during those conversations can be hard, which is why a lot of debate hosts just tap out of it. Wick, Piers Morgan, and others, they express their opinions, but that's not how I host them, which makes it even more difficult for me. But I don't think there was an appealing argument about a lack of necessity, about the idea that it doesn't work in convincing people, about the idea that a lack of good faith on the opponent's side makes it so you cannot still bring over either people on the center right, middle, or people who are just generally disaffected and could not really readily be labeled, which is a lot of Americans. You should challenge Vaush to a debate about debating. I'm thinking about challenge Vaush to a debate about debating, but then I thought, if I challenge Vaush to a debate about debating, this debate, if we did have that debate, would we have a moderator to host that debate, or would we just have that debate one-on-one, and so we could have a debate about the debate while... Okay, never mind. I can't. Too much. I tried to do a bit, but like midway, like the handlebars started going...